The American Midwest, known as America's Heartland, farms stretching to the horizon, and small towns where everyone knows your name. But every spring, when warm Gulf moisture collides with cold Canadian air over these plains, the atmosphere becomes violent. Today we're going over the strongest and deadliest tornadoes to ever hit the states of Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. But first, we'll see a historic tornado in Ohio. One of the only tornadoes to have received a preliminary F6 rating on the Fujita scale. Hello, and welcome to Deadliest Disasters. Xenia, Ohio has a tragic distinction. It was struck by violent, deadly tornadoes twice in 26 years. On April 3rd, 1974, Xenia was hit by an F5 tornado, part of a Super Outbreak, the largest tornado outbreak on record at the time, with 148 confirmed tornadoes across 13 states in just 24 hours. The Xenia tornado was officially rated F5, though Tetsuya Fujita's preliminary estimates suggest it might have been even more violent. The Xenia tornado made history by getting a preliminary F6 rating along with the Lubbock, Texas tornado of 1970. Eventually, Dr. Fujita would refine his scale and limit the maximum rating of a tornado to F5. The path length of the Xenia tornado was approximately 31.3 miles. The tornado was on the ground for about 39 minutes. Estimated winds exceeded 300 miles per hour. 32 people were killed in Xenia alone. Approximately 1,200 were injured across the outbreak, with Xenia suffering major casualties. Damage was estimated at $250 million in 1974 dollars, equivalent to $1.5 billion today. The tornado cut a path of destruction through residential streets, university buildings, and businesses. In some areas, the destruction was so complete that investigators couldn't determine where houses had once stood. Foundations were completely scoured clean, and trees were debarked and snapped at ground level. People were killed in their homes, in their cars, and on the street. Some were never found, simply erased by the storm. 26 years later, on September 20th, 2000, Xenia was struck again. This time, the tornado was rated F4. It only had a path length of about 8 to 9 miles long, as it produced violent local damage to structures and businesses. The 2000 storm cut through some of the same areas that had been rebuilt after 1974. Residents who had survived the first disaster found themselves once again huddling in basements, listening to their homes being torn apart above them. Only one person died in this tornado, but over 100 were injured. Although the Xenia tornadoes are some of the strongest ever seen in Ohio, they are not the deadliest in the state. On June 28, 1924, before modern meteorology, northern Ohio endured its deadliest tornado disaster. The Lorraine-Sandusky event was cataloged as F4, though accounts describe what may have been multiple tornadoes or a multi-vortex system that actually crossed Lake Erie. Historical sources describe a long lake crossing, but precise modern path metrics are limited in this historical record. What we know is at least 85 people were killed and at least 350 were injured. Damage was reported as an astonishing $12 million in 1920s dollars. In Lorraine, collapsing theaters, bathhouses, and downtown blocks produced scenes of mass casualties. The Lorraine Palace Theater collapsed during a showing, crushing dozens of moviegoers. Bodies were pulled from the rubble for days. Downtown Sandusky was completely devastated. Entire families were killed in their homes. For its era, the storm was catastrophic. Losses measured in scores of lives. Entire generations lost in a matter of minutes. There was no warning, no way to prepare. People looked up and saw the sky turn green, saw the funnel descending, and had only seconds to react. One of the Northeast's worst tornado events began in northeastern Ohio and destroyed towns across a long, fast track into Pennsylvania. This tornado was rated F5 where it struck Niles and Wheatland. Its path length was estimated at 40 to 45 miles across rough terrain as it tracked east. The tornado was very large and long-tracked, with damage paths 2 miles wide. 18 people were killed in the Ohio and Pennsylvania segment. About 310 were injured. Damage estimates vary by county, totaling several tens of millions of dollars in 1985 currency for the impacted communities. The Niles-Wheatland tornado struck business districts and neighborhoods with surgical precision. In Niles, people died in concentrated commercial areas, trapped in collapsing buildings, crushed by debris, thrown by the wind into structures and trees. The tornado then crossed into Pennsylvania, where Wheatland was almost totally destroyed. Homes were reduced to scattered debris, trees were stripped and snapped. The landscape looked like a bomb had gone off. Survivors described the tornado as impossibly wide, impossibly loud, and impossibly violent. Although not the deadliest in Ohio history, this tornado made history by being the only F5 to have touched the state of Pennsylvania, making it the easternmost F5 tornado in United States history. In the late-night darkness of May 25, 1955, Kansas would experience its most deadly tornado ever recorded, and the city of Udall was right in its path. This tornado was rated F5. It tracked more than 50 miles from the Oklahoma border northward into southeast Kansas. Eyewitnesses reported an enormous funnel. Descriptions include widths of over 1,000 yards and widespread violent damage. Approximately 75 to 77 people were killed in Udall, with total event fatalities reported at 80 to 82 overall. 270 people were injured in Udall alone. The entire town was virtually destroyed. Many homes and large public buildings were obliterated. Vehicles were wrapped around debris and thrown hundreds of yards. Water towers were toppled. The level of structural destruction left a town grieving and emergency systems completely overwhelmed. Because the tornado struck at night, most people were asleep. They woke up to the sound of the storm. Many died in their beds, crushed when their homes collapsed on top of them. Others were thrown from their houses and killed on impact with the ground and the debris. This same supercell storm also produced another F5 tornado in Blackwell, Oklahoma. Udall would be rebuilt, but it would never be the same. Decades later, a powerful April supercell tore through the Wichita area and produced one of the most violent tornadoes of the 1990s and one of the strongest tornadoes Kansas has ever seen. The Andover-Wichita tornado was rated F5 and had a path length of approximately 46 miles, a long track from Clearwater through Hayesville, through eastern Wichita, and onto Andover. In Wichita, the tornado tracked across the McConnell Air Force Base, strengthening shortly before hitting the tarmac. At this location, the tornado narrowly avoided striking 10 Rockwell B-1 Lancers, 2 of which were equipped with nuclear warheads. The tornado was on the ground for 1 hour and 25 minutes. Violent damage indicators at Andover included obliterated mobile homes and heavy structural failures. 17 people were killed and approximately 225 were injured. Damage was estimated at $300 million in 1991. The Andover tornado was notable for being extremely well documented on video. Footage shows the massive wedge tornado, nearly a mile wide, grinding across the landscape. You can see debris being lofted thousands of feet in the air. You can see structures simply cease to exist as the tornado passes over them. But what the video doesn't show is the sound of people screaming inside those structures, the feeling of being lifted and thrown, many who didn't survive. More recently, the small Kansas town of Greensburg was almost completely destroyed by an EF5 tornado that tore directly through the town. Its path length was approximately 28.8 miles through Kiowa County and Greensburg. It was on the ground for about 65 minutes over its long track. At maximum width, the tornado reached 1.7 miles across. 12 people were killed in Greensburg and another 63 were injured. A staggering amount for a city with a population of just 1,400. More than 95% of Greensburg structures were damaged or destroyed. The town essentially ceased to exist. Greensburg's buildings were reduced to foundations. Entire neighborhoods were replaced by empty slabs and scattered debris. The community would later rebuild with a focus on sustainability and green technology, but the immediate night of May 4th left a dozen dead and the town unrecognizable. The tornado struck at night. People huddled in basements and bathrooms, listening to their world being torn apart above them. Some basements collapsed, trapping and killing those who had sought shelter there. Others emerged from their shelters to find that everything, their home, their neighbors' homes, every landmark they'd once known, was simply gone. Half of the town's population moved, never to return. This tornado made history as the first tornado ever rated EF5 on the newly introduced enhanced Fujita scale. It also had 5 confirmed satellite tornadoes, which added to its extreme destruction. One of Nebraska's worst disasters struck Omaha on Easter Sunday, 1913, in an outbreak that produced multiple violent tornadoes. The Omaha, Nebraska tornado was retrospectively rated F4, though some evidence points to F5 damage. The tornado reached up to half a mile wide in places, producing multiple vortex damage through North Omaha. 103 people were killed, 94 in Omaha proper. At least 350 were injured. Contemporary damage estimates reached $8 million in 1913, which much of Omaha's near north side and other neighborhoods completely damaged. Photographs from the time show entire blocks flattened and foundations exposed. In one area, a crowd was killed while attending an Easter performance when the building collapsed. Bodies were pulled from theaters, churches, and homes. Because it struck on Easter Sunday, many people were in church when the tornado hit. Entire congregations were killed when church buildings collapsed. Families dressed in their Sunday best were found dead together in the rubble. Omaha in 1913 had limited medical infrastructure. The sudden influx of hundreds of critically injured patients overwhelmed doctors and hospitals. Many who might have survived with modern trauma care died from blood loss, infection, and shock. This remains the deadliest tornado in Nebraska history. The Hallam, Nebraska F4 tornado, a tornado that is remarkable primarily for one statistic, its massive size. The tornado had a path length of approximately 52 to 54 miles, depending on the survey. At maximum width, it reached 2.5 miles across, recognized as the second largest tornado width on record after El Reno in 2013. Imagine a tornado with a width of 44 football fields placed end to end. Miraculously, only one person was killed, and approximately 38 others were injured. Damage was estimated at $160 million. In Hallam, entire town blocks were affected simultaneously because the funnel stretched for miles across the landscape. You couldn't outrun it. You couldn't drive around it. If it was coming towards you, you could only hide. Despite the staggering size, fortunately the death toll was limited compared to some mid-century events. Modern warning systems gave residents time to take shelter. The single fatality was a man killed when his home collapsed on top of him. The town of Hallam was essentially destroyed. Most residents chose not to rebuild, and instead they moved, never to return. Today, Hallam has a population of about 300. 2011, one of the most historic years for tornado outbreaks in world history. A year which would see a staggering 6 EF5 tornadoes. A year in which over 500 people would perish in the violence of these storms. The Joplin, Missouri tornado was the deadliest single tornado of 2011, and it was the costliest single tornado in world history. It had a relatively small path length of 21.6 miles, but it traveled through densely populated areas. It was on the ground for about 38 minutes, and at its peak, the tornado was up to 1 mile wide. Tragically, 158 people were killed, and more than 1,150 were injured. The monetary damage was estimated at $2.8 billion, placing it among the costliest single tornadoes in U.S. history. But again, the numbers tell only part of the story. Whole neighborhoods completely vanished. St. John's Regional Medical Center, a modern, reinforced concrete hospital, was catastrophically damaged while patients and staff huddled in interior rooms and hallways. Windows exploded inward, sending glass shards through corridors. The roof was torn away. Patients on ventilators died when the power failed and backup generators were destroyed. Cars were picked up and thrown hundreds of feet, wrapped around trees, stacked on top of buildings. Piles of debris, twisted metal, shattered wood, insulation, personal belongings, and human remains turned entire blocks into unrecognizable wasteland. The Joplin tornado's death toll made it the deadliest U.S. tornado since 1947 and the 7th deadliest in United States history. In the 21st century, with advanced warnings and meteorological technology, 158 people still died. An astonishing statistic that will forever be cemented in history. A devastating late summer tornado struck southwestern suburban Chicago and directly impacted the town of Plainfield. The Plainfield, Illinois tornado was rated F5 on the Fujita scale. Its damage path was approximately 16.4 miles long, and it was on the ground for 30 minutes. The damage path ranged from 600 yards to about half a mile wide. 29 people were killed, and approximately 350 were injured. Monetary damage was estimated at $160 million. Plainfield's nightmare came without the usual warning signs. It was late summer, past peak tornado season. The storm moved southeast, destroying hundreds of homes and flipping well-built structures as if they were cardboard boxes. Because the area was suburban and populated, damage indicators allowed investigators to conclusively rate it F5. Anchored homes were swept completely away. A school was destroyed. Cars were thrown hundreds of yards and mangled beyond recognition. Survivors described the sound like a freight train, a cliche that doesn't quite capture the bone-shaking, teeth-rattling roar of almost 300-mile-per-hour winds. Then the pressure drop, ears popping, windows imploding, and walls collapsing inward. This tornado made history because it's the only official F5 or EF5 tornado to happen in the month of August. The Palm Sunday tornado outbreak of April 11, 1965, was a devastating series of severe thunderstorms that spawned numerous tornadoes striking the U.S. Midwestern states of Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. The outbreak produced 55 confirmed tornadoes, 18 of which were of F4 intensity, with estimated winds of 207 to 260 miles per hour, resulting in approximately 270 fatalities and over 3,660 injuries. It is one of the deadliest tornado outbreaks in U.S. history, with the state of Indiana suffering the highest death toll with 141 fatalities. Indiana bore the brunt of the outbreak, with the majority of the strong to violent tornadoes occurring across the state. The most famous tornado of the outbreak was the Indiana Twin Vortex tornado, affecting the neighboring towns of Dunlap, Midway, and northern Goshen. This iconic tornado struck a trailer park early evening near Midway, Indiana. It became powerful enough that it split into two very large vortexes rotating around a central point, causing one solid damaged track. This single tornado was responsible for 31 deaths and 252 injuries. No more than an hour later, another twin funnel tornado ravaged sections of Dunlap and Goshen, claiming an additional 36 lives and injuring over 320 others. This tornado may have been the strongest of the day, with tornado expert Thomas B. Grazlis assigning an F5 level with estimated winds over 260 miles per hour, although the official rating is F4. President Lyndon B. Johnson surveyed the damage at the town of Dunlap and promised assistance. It was the worst destruction he had ever witnessed. Palm Sunday 1965 was supposed to be a day of worship and family. Instead, it became one of the deadliest tornado outbreaks in American history and the deadliest for Indiana State. We'll end our video with the single deadliest tornado in United States history, the infamous Tri-State tornado, which had the highest death toll, longest path length, and longest duration on the ground of any tornado we've covered so far. A tornado that carved a path of destruction from Missouri through Illinois and into southwest Indiana. The tornado was rated equivalent to an F5. Its path length was historically reported at 219 miles, though that figure has been debated in literature. It stayed on the ground for approximately 3 hours and 45 minutes. Contemporary estimates of its width vary wildly. Some historic reports suggest a very large, multiple vortex structure spanning from hundreds of yards to over a mile across at times. 695 people died and over 2,000 were injured. The monetary damage was roughly $16.5 million in $1925, equivalent to billions today. But those numbers don't capture the true horror. Entire towns were wiped out. In Murfreesboro, Illinois, more than 100 people died in neighborhoods that were simply gone, swept clean to the foundation. Communication lines were severed. There were no sirens, no radar, no weather warnings. Rescue efforts faltered in the chaos. People trapped under rubble screamed for help that wouldn't arrive for hours or even days. Some burned alive when fires broke out in the wreckage of collapsed homes, fueled by ruptured gas lines and overturned stoves. Rural doctors with limited supplies treated compound fractures, head trauma, and impalement injuries by lantern light. Many of the injured died in the days that followed. The Tri-State tornado set a benchmark that has never been matched. 12 tornado events, 6 states, and nearly 1,500 people dead. The Midwest has proven that decade after decade, deadly and destructive tornadoes can happen anywhere and strike when least expected. Thanks for watching. This has been Deadliest Disasters. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. That's the best way to help our channel grow. And if you want to buy me a cup of coffee, check the link in the description or on our channel page. Thank you.